Did you know that the Incan Empire had no concept of money? That's right, the Inca Empire is probably the only civilization in history to have no class of traders and no commerce of any kind within its boundaries. And despite having no concept of money or markets, they were able to build a thriving empire larger in size than Germany, France, Spain, Italy, and the UK combined. And it's even more surprising that they were highly urbanized. Their largest city and capital was called Cusco, and it boasted a population of 150,000 people. For comparison, the population of London at the time was only 50,000. So how did the Incan economy manage to function without money and market, and that too so effectively? Well, that's the question that we're going to be answering in today's video. So subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and let's get right into it. The birth of civilization came with the birth of money and commerce, and that's all true except in the case of the Andeans, of which the Inca are the best known. They developed highly sophisticated planned cities, and they were master builders and land planners. They constructed massive pyramids and sustained highly complex mountain irrigation projects. All of this was done by people who were paid no salaries, and they paid no taxes in return either. So why is this? What exactly enabled the Incan society to function and prosper this way? And there are two aspects to that answer that defined the Incan economy. One was central planning, and the other was labor as a unit of wealth. You see, all economic activity was centrally planned. Now, normally we'd think of someone as wealthy if they had a lot of money. However, in the Incan economy, it was someone who could feed a large labor force. Then they were considered quote-unquote wealthy. You see, food was their coin. And so, instead of paying taxes in money, every Incan was required to provide labor to the state. The government, in return, would provide them with all of life's necessities. This would include food, tools, raw materials, and clothing. Now, not everybody had to pay labor tax. The higher-ranking nobility and the clergy were actually exempt from this kind of labor tax, but it can be said that they did provide their fair share by performing religious and administrative services. Now, this is not to say that everybody was entirely dependent on the state. You see, ordinary people were free to engage in their own enterprises as well, and people exchanged favors instead of paying each other money. People were expected to help cultivate their neighbors' land and expected the neighbors would pay them back in due course. It was a really good system. Because labor and not money dictated wealth, it meant that laborers had to be very well kept and looked after. Otherwise, there was no incentive for the laborers to buy into this kind of system. That's precisely why the Incan Empire had one of the most comprehensive welfare systems in the world. And this is especially surprising given that we're talking about medieval times right now. It's an era known for its relative cruelty and its violent existence. And here we are talking about universal welfare. Part of this was also land ownership. You see, unlike other medieval societies, in the Incan Empire, the land around a village wasn't owned by some powerful landlord. Rather, it was communally owned by the villagers themselves for their own welfare. It was a pretty neat system. You see, when a couple got married, the state would provide them with their own plot of land to cultivate, and then the size of this plot would increase with the birth of each child. And taking care of the sick, the elderly, and the disabled was also a shared responsibility trusted upon by the village themselves. Beyond this, each family was also given 2 llamas for use. Owning livestock in pre-modern times was a big deal anyway, and here we have the Incan state providing it to people for free. The Incan state also reserved stocks of goods for public uses in case of emergencies, such as during the times of drought. Now, given all of this, you're probably thinking that the Incan Empire was this magical place where everything ran smoothly and everyone was happy. Well, it wasn't a perfect utopia. You see, inequalities still existed, with nobles and clergies enjoying far more privileged access to the state resources than the normal folks. There were also other problems that we would see in any other civilization around that time. This would include crime, forced military service, forced relocation of lands, and more. So yeah, it wasn't perfect. Nevertheless, the Incas remain a rare example of a pre-modern society where the social system wasn't simply built to benefit those who ruled, but also the masses being ruled over. But the good times don't last. Unfortunately for them, Columbus had successfully made an expedition to the New World around 1492. He went back to the Old World to tell his tales, and now it was only a matter of time before the Europeans would come bearing guns, germs, and steel. Old World diseases weakened the Incas, killing many, including their ruler. Faced with multiple crises, the country would be plunged into a civil war, and the arriving Spaniards would eventually take full advantage of this, ultimately conquering this vast empire. As a result, most of the Incans would be enslaved. They would be forced into labor in the mines and plantations of their new overlords. Many would be overworked to death and succumb to diseases from their brutal work conditions. The extracted wealth would then be sold for handsome profits back in the markets of Europe. Now, taking all of this into consideration, in hindsight, while I don't agree with everything that the British economist Adam Smith has to say, I do understand his view that the very first responsibility for any government is defense, a concept that would have really helped out the Incan Empire. A society can become prosperous, but it is exactly that prosperity that invites others to conquer it. To ensure that it remains prosperous, you have to have the means to defend it, and the Incans did not have the means. And as a result, they paid with their literal lives. If you liked this video, you'll like this one that I made about the Roman Empire. Check it out here, and I'll see you soon.